Good afternoon, bienvenidos a ¿Qué pasa, Mujer? Welcome to ¿Qué pasa, Mujer? Estamos aquí todos los domingos a las 4 de la tarde. We're here every Sunday at 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and we're celebrating another Sunday. We're super excited to be here, just being able to celebrate us as a people and to be able to thank ¿Qué pasa, Mujer? And Pot TV for allowing us to have this platform to discuss whatever we want to. So today we're gonna have our special guest. As always, we get super excited when he's here, Vidal. So we're gonna go ahead and bring him on so we can get started with our hot topic. And thank you to our producer Mark for making everything happen for us here. It makes it look like magic. I wouldn't be able to do it without him. Today's topic is very, I don't want to say controversial, but interesting, right, Vidal?
Sure. Hello. I'm
We
so
always
glad to
love
be
to
back
talk
with you.
about this. Hi, Maddie.
Hi, buenas
Howdy.
tardes.
Buenas tardes. We're always very excited when Vidal is here because, well, I personally get excited because I love the conversations. I love your energy, Vidal, and I love that I love your name in Spanish. I don't know what people call you, but I call you Vidal, and I just think it's you bring this insight to our conversations. A lot of the times, you know, we might read an article or we might be knowledgeable about a particular topic, but I think you really bring this different aspect, this different point of view, or you always add these nuggets to things that makes me, I have a lot of wow moments with you whenever we
I
talk.
appreciate that.
So I always enjoy when you're here.
I appreciate that. And this is always learning for me too. So just to have your insights and even questions and prompts that you present have me thinking as well. So I really appreciate being here and learning with you too.
Okay, great. Maddie, how are you? How's it going? She's on mute. I don't know. I know we're having technical difficulties today. I know I'm getting a little bit over a cold, so I'll be going on mute on and off because of the cough. But I don't know if you could hear us, Maddie. We can't hear you.
Yeah, I hear you.
There we go.
How's it going? How are you?
Doing good. Missed you guys. It's been a little while. And with that, thank you for being here with us. Like Viviana said, you always bring a new perspective to things and
Yeah.
kind of jumps from our opinion to a professional view. So thank you for that.
I
Definitely.
appreciate it.
So today we wanted to talk a little bit about voting and how Latinos vote. Why do we vote? What's so important about it? What are the fears that we have about it? I know in our countries, I have a cousin that lives in Colombia. We're the same age, and he's big on voting. He's a retired military, but just overall, the country itself is all about voting. So
Yeah.
voting coming to the United States is not something new. It's something that we practice in our own countries. But I think it's learning the system here.
Yeah.
And also the environment that we're in today with the with everything that's happened with immigration and with the border. So I just kind of wanted to get your insight, Vidal, and I don't know if you had any specific questions, but I know, excuse me, I know for us Latinos, we're big on family.
Yep.
So any topics that have to do with family, that's where kind of like the heart comes in, and that's really usually where our vote gravitates to. I know that our vote has really evolved. It used to be red and then blue, and then it has
Yeah.
kind of gone back and forth. So I just kind of wanted to get your input, so you can give us a little bit of background about voting itself, just in general, and then we'll throw in the Latino community.
Sure. And one of the things that actually kind of sparked this conversation was a community meeting around this idea of, and I emphasize idea, it was this idea of gathering the Hispanic or Latino vote. And it was a fascinating meeting because there were a number of course, I work at a university, so I had college students there. You had all the generations. So I appreciate your point about family. But what was so interesting as the meeting progressed, it was more and more obvious that this whole idea of the Hispanic vote was not holding steady in that space, because what was coming up were a number of things. It just wasn't the idea of who to vote for, even just ties to a political party. It was like, what is actually driving? What are some factors within the community that are actually driving me towards not just a person, but also certain causes, um, issues that are driving an individual or a community vote. And so there are a few things that came up that I'm hoping even you all can help me with. In that space, it was fascinating. There were just maybe 3 or 4 pieces that came up that centered around um, not only where individuals landed, again, with a person, but around issues. One was fascinating for me because, again, it was multi-generational, even what they call themselves. So we had university students in that space that were using the term Latine. Then we had older generations that were very comfortable with using Hispanic or Latino, or they wanted to make clear distinctions in that space. And that became important because it was highlighting even generational differences. So you can have individuals in the same household, a family, multi-generational, but are having very distinct experiences in that space. One thing that's also interesting is that you may have such diversity around national origins or my tie to a country or a region. But what also happening now at this stage in the US is that you have more US born Hispanics or Latin Americans that are driving the vote. And so this idea again around Hispanic vote or Latino vote um, was kind of deteriorating because it was almost like we were talking to Latin American communities like they were all immigrants. And that's not the case now when you think about those who are in voting age at this point. And the last point that I thought was fascinating, um, religion and spirituality. How that was a big driver around issues. Even for those who, I think many times when we think about the Latin American community, we think about Catholicism. But we're seeing now over decades there's been a decline and more are moving towards either being Protestant, evangelical, or nothing, or none, just not identifying with religion, and how that comes into play with issues around abortion, um, around transgender issues, even our values around who we welcome into our land or who we welcome into our homes. Those values come into play when we think about immigration. And so those are some pieces that actually came up that I'm even still trying to explore because I think it's become critical as we think about quote unquote the Hispanic vote or the Latin American vote. It's not just a process, but also what's happening within the community is this idea of delineation. Who's more tied to the Latin American community? Am I more tied because I am still a practicing Catholic? Am I still tied because I actually speak Spanish? Am I still tied because I think just a number of pieces? And so I think it's an unfortunate piece, but it also is a complicated piece when we think about how are we getting voting participation for the Latin American community when we need to really understand what their interests are, what their factors are, and what their drivers are in some ways. Yeah. I'll leave it there in case something came up for you.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, everything that you mentioned. Because even using the terms Latin or Latinx and all that, right? Like, I don't know. Perhaps you know the answer to this because we've talked about this when it comes to the census, right? Or identifying yourself with whoever comes up with those names. I was listening to a video this morning. They were saying that I don't know what the percentages are, but a lot of my community just wants to go back to the basics of just Latin or Hispanic. That's it. That's all we want to. We don't want to complicate it with your sexual orientation or any of that stuff. We're good with Hispanic or Latino, so I don't know if it's more of the younger generation that is trying to come up with these additional words. It makes me think also the fact of let's divide and conquer type of thing as well. Where we can kind of, put yourself in this category and then it starts to create some type of division even within a household. It kind of makes me think about that. I know a couple of weeks ago, I was talking to a friend excuse me, she's
Hmm.
half Filipino and half Black. And
Hmm.
so, when people ask her, she said, I'm half Filipino. So we were saying, so what's the other half? Because we know, because
Yeah.
we're her friends, right? We're like,
Yeah.
what's the other half, right? She said,
Hmm.
well, I don't have to say what my other half is because it's obvious when you look at me that I'm half Black. And I said, well,
Hmm.
not necessarily,
Right.
So we went out to eat and we started serving. We turned it into a game. We told the waitress about it, and so then she sent other waitresses over so we can ask. So it was nice because it was Asian, Caucasian, a Black man, a Dominican woman. So they all
Mhm.
came to the table. They were like, "Oh, I heard you guys have a question for us." So it was just interesting to hear
Yeah.
everybody's perspective,
Hmm.
because she could easily be a Dominican or, have some
Hmm.
Latin in her as well, the way that she looks. But I just
Yeah.
think that using those words are important. I think, Vidal, you and I have talked about this, like, who are you, right? Like, how do you
Yeah. Yeah.
identify yourself?
Yeah.
And I just think that, I think that that's a big thing, to be honest with you, in reference to who
Hmm.
you are. My children are biracial. And when I had the conversation with my friend, I immediately asked my kids, like, if somebody were to ask you, what are you, what would you say?
Yeah.
Because I wanted to make sure that
Hmm.
they feel equally proud of both of their heritage.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so luckily they did identify. One of them said Black and Latino, and then my other son said Black and Colombian. So he
Okay.
specified more Colombian.
Hmm.
But I'm good with either one of those, to be honest with
Yeah.
you. But I think, yeah, just the voting piece. I think it's conversations that we have at home. Like there's family members here of mine that are able to vote and some that are not able to vote, but they still have a voice in reference to their thoughts about, the vote on, especially the whole immigration thing that's happening right now.
Hmm.
Um, I think all of that affects us. I make sure that I vote. I make sure that my oldest son votes. He's 21,
Hmm.
and sometimes he doesn't know, like, what am I voting for? Like he
Yeah. Yeah.
understands the process, but he doesn't really know who to vote for.
Hmm.
So I think it's the lack of conversations that might be happening at home. And we've never had the conversation about Latinx or anything like that with
Yeah.
him. They just, they choose the words that they have chosen to identify themselves.
Yeah.
So,
And you hit on a very good point too, when you were describing kind of, maybe how most of the votes may have been Democratic or Republican. I've heard one. It was actually research. I love Pew Research Center, the Pew Research Center, because they just have so much data, even data around this. But one of the points that the researcher made is that the Latin American community, Hispanic community, has charted their own path throughout elections. Meaning what you just said, what are those things are important to us? Um, who is going to speak for us and understands us? And that's why I actually started with the whole idea around language and identity, because many times it is the initial engagement. Like, will it take a Hispanic or Latin American representative to represent the community? And I think what was becoming complicated is that you may have individuals who are in politics, but they sometimes may be considered the elite, meaning that they have money. They just have different background and different access to different things. And sometimes their experience may be distant from maybe the Latin American Hispanic community particularly in certain regions, because there's even variety there. Um, you can think about the Puerto Rican in New York, and you think about the Cubans in Florida, or you think about the Mexicans in Texas. Not to say they're not in other places, but that region that experienced their histories, are going to drive, not only just the individuals again, but also the different issues and causes that are, I think, important. Um, because our recent election, it was so fascinating. I think now, even to researchers in media, you know, um, how there was a great push for Trump by Latin Americans, but at the same time, there were some challenges related to some of our approaches to immigration and immigration philosophies and some of the policies. And even just having an individual trying to represent all the complexity within a community, I still find it fascinating, because you have a process where it's, and I hate to say this sometimes, but it's like, I think it's like the better of two evils or something like that, where an individual may not encompass everything, particularly related to your needs and your issues, but who more closely connects to who I am and what my issues and priorities are. And so I think it will become increasingly complicated with the future generations.
Mhm.
Yeah, and to answer your question too, you are seeing younger generations, use Latinx more. Latinx really hadn't taken off like others have. It's kind of the same way that others are just trying to create these different terms to be quote unquote progressive in some ways, but not realizing you're creating terms that are distant from the people. And so that's why Latine came up, Latine, with the accent, I think, because it was, at least if you're going to have a different term, have something that at least is aligned with the Spanish language. Because X was just, it was a gender message. It was a gender symbol
Mhm.
more so than anything. So you're absolutely right. But that wasn't taken off. I mean, you still have individuals who, again, who are very committed to what that term may represent in terms of gender identity, but it hasn't become as popular as many would have seen, especially because sometimes it may be used in media, but it's not as popular as, again, as would have seen because they considered it progressive in some
Right,
ways.
right.
Mhm.
Yeah. I think to your point about representation, I think Bat Bunny
Uh-huh.
represents a lot. And I think people after the Super Bowl, people that didn't know much about him really started taking him a little bit more serious
Yeah.
because of all the messages that were given to us through the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And I think he I don't know that we have a specific person that's our person. I think we have
Right.
multiple in
Mhm.
different facets. I know John Leguizamo is very active
Yeah.
and very vocal
Hmm.
with political views or just
Hmm.
human rights just in general. But I just think that I don't think we have that person or that organization that truly represents us as a
Hmm.
one.
Yeah.
I don't know if Maddie, if you have a different perception of that, or if you know of any other names, but those are the top two that kind of come to mind for me.
I think right now, like you said, like Bad Bunny is the one that kind of is trying to bring everything together.
Hmm.
Going back to the terminology, I think the whole Latinx terminology kind of it just comes from the need to be seen. I think all of us, especially when you come from another country and you come here to the United States, you just want to be seen,
Sure.
and I think like we were saying, it's like the newer generation, it's more okay, there's more to us than just being Latino. There's we belong in this community as well. So
Yeah.
the gender part of it, or non-binary part of it, plays a big part of it too, because again,
Hmm.
it's one of those topics that we didn't grow up addressing in our Latino households.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm pretty sure that there is a lot of other representatives out there when it comes to our Latino community. I do know that I wish I could remember the name off the top of my head, but I know that there's like a transgender actress, that's very, very popular, and again, putting the Latino name out there. So
Right.
I think, depending on where you look at, we we are being represented, and it's just a matter, you know there's so many sides, how can we bring them together?
Hmm. And I think that's the piece you hit on too, where you have these younger generations coming who are looking at the complexity of our identities, how they all intersect in these different ways. Um, but you may have leaders that are speaking to more of the conservative side of my values and my priorities. And I think that's where the tensions really lying now. I think they've always existed, but some way we're just kind of amplified. Okay, this person because I have a strong faith or connection to my faith and I actually practice, um, those are some values and some policies that I can get with. I can get that with that piece. But that person also has this value or this perception in creating values or policies around gender. And I mean gender broadly, meaning, abortion rights, or you think about trans access. You're thinking about just a number of pieces and just the tensions that just will exist. Because again, when you're talking about, it goes back to the meeting I was thinking about again, when you talk about the Hispanic vote, like what issues are you talking about? Because there's some complexity there that I think we sometimes will minimize to just, where were your people born? I think there's a lot more at play, and I think it's unfortunate because again, it's not only we lack representation, but we actually begin to create policies that harm. And as I think about how we're trying to navigate just the times now, how does that look multi-generationally? Because we have some younger generations who are definitely disconnected from particularly politics, not even just the process, but just the interest and even what they consider really important matters to them. But then you also have generations who may be leaning more in the conservative place or more progressive place that just have different views. And so I just wonder about, particularly as I'm seeing more around faith and identity, how we should be giving more attention to that as we think about the complexities of the Hispanic or Latin American needs. Mhm.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, my grandmother is 90, so she watches the news every day. So she
Uh-huh.
tells me every day about Donald Trump and she was like, and I know just here recently, the Pope has something to say to Donald Trump about his way of doing things.
Yeah.
So I think even on a spiritual and a faith aspect, I think more of the older generation will kind of follow that lead. But like you said, younger people, they don't know who the Pope is. Some of them don't know what the Pope represents. And
Yeah.
like you said, they've geared to like more non-denominational religions versus the traditional Catholic ones.
Hmm.
So I think that does make a difference in reference to how we vote, or who we vote for, and our morals and our values
Hmm.
have kind of like changed a little bit depending on the generation. So.
And then I learned, I've heard this before when I'm engaged with the Jewish community, but I learned it as I was engaged with the Catholic community as well. This term of being culturally Catholic and practicing. Where culturally Catholic is kind of basically generations of my family have always been Catholic, so I make sure that I'm honoring, maybe very signature traditions, certain signature practice matters, right? Versus those who are active in mass, like have weekly attendance and all those different things. And so they're even seeing that difference. So even this idea of Latin American Hispanic Catholics, you still have to even niche down just a little bit more to understand how active they are within the faith too. Maddie, I'm laughing at you too.
Oh yeah, most definitely. We do that all the time. I don't do it as much anymore, but I used to before, just
Yeah.
because I'm a little bit more rooted on my non-denominational status at the moment.
Hmm.
But yeah, before we just go to church, do the, all that stuff, but we don't really know why we're doing it. We just kind of do it out of tradition.
Yeah.
I remember having questions about the Bible and God when I was about 18 or 19, and I went to one of my aunts, and she said, "You're Catholic and you'll always be Catholic."
Mm.
She still didn't answer my question, but that was her response. So like, don't even question whatever questions you have. Don't ask those questions. Like, you're Catholic
Hmm.
and you'll always be Catholic. Um, so it's very strong, very rooted. So I think the religion does have a strong it has this power over and I think this just happens in religion, period.
Yeah. Hmm.
If your pastor, if your minister tells you, pretty much the flock will just buy into whatever the leader is saying for that
Hmm.
congregation. So it's a lot of power at the pulpit.
Gotcha. I was laughing at Maddie because Maddie raised her hand right away.
Hmm. Hmm. Maddie, do
Yeah.
you do you do you instill that to your kids? Like, has it gone down to all the generations?
I don't think so. Not as much. I mean, I grew up a diehard Catholic, like living in DR. Again, that's a religion that is practiced over there. And I remember growing up, my grandma used to, like, the church literally was right across the street from my house. So my grandma would come walking, she would pick us up, knock on the door, the kids ready, and then we would cross the street together and go to church. And then the church was like a big center, and we did like other activities there, but it was everything around the church. So I grew up Catholic. Now, when I married my husband family, it's more Christian, but not Catholic, evangelicals. I don't know, like, would that fall on the Pentecostal? I don't know. But it's not Catholic. So I haven't, we've been together for over 30 years. So I haven't been to mass in probably, no, I'll lie. So when my mom passed, we did go to church. So, but it's not my normal anymore. And no, I don't push religion, on my children. My father-in-law is a pastor, and he, the kids have, even if they don't understand Spanish, they do get ministered in Spanish. So so they every time we get together, whether you understand it or not, you are going to pray. You're going to listen to people praying over you. This is what we do before we eat. This is what we do when we get together as a family, when there's a big milestone, and things of that nature. So they've gone up seeing that, but
you get the last part. And I appreciate you sharing it, because one of the pieces that, again, I think where we sometimes miss it as we think about engaging Hispanic and Latin American community in voting process, and even just giving attention and even caring, is I think that's a layer that we miss. Because even when we think about religious and spiritual life, we'll start even just again with the person. There are sometimes gender messages related to it, around, will I vote for a woman to represent my interest? And that's before you get to the complexities of, like, gender diversity, like trans identity, by identity. And then the other layers related to, again, immigration status, like how we treat people, how we treat strangers, again, those who are vulnerable. How do we provide or demonstrate care that represents the values that I have or my community have? Those are things that, again, are underlying, that are driving these huge political matters right now. And again, I think we missed the boat when it's just solely, okay, we recognize the grand diversity that exists because you're from there, your ancestry is from there. But what does that mean when you think about, again, the issues that are important to us? But I find it, it's not unexpected, but again, I think it's surprising how much we miss that element around the Hispanic experience when we're considering political issues. Because sometimes we don't want to talk about religion, especially in politics. We don't want to talk about politics, but then politics and religion, that can be complicated. That can be complicated.
Oh no, that's not a good mix. Anywhere. Oh my God, if you combine the two, I remember I had a uncle, he passed away. He's Colombian, but he lived in Florida, and he had a lot of Cuban friends in Cuba, in Florida. So they would argue all the time about just anything and everything that was on the news. So it could definitely get heated. I'm very delicate with my conversations when it comes to, like, politics and religion. Maybe I'm a little bit more comfortable with the religion aspect than the political one, because it is really so delicate, and I don't feel that I'm so extremely knowledgeable of it to be able to defend where I come from. But I know when it's time for me to vote for anything, I do my homework to find out, what is it that I'm voting for. And I do have certain standards and certain morals that I go by, but just in general, it's just such a careful topic to discuss. But I think we need to, I think we need to learn to have these conversations, because, like our producer pulled up two organizations, Unidos US and Latino Justice, right? So I just looked them up, and have I heard of them? Yes. But I just looked at, and again, I'm not saying that they're not doing anything for our community, but I just went to the website for Unidos US, and I clicked on the events, and they have their annual conference coming up in July in Texas. But I have to dig in a little bit more, because I just don't see much more than that. If that makes sense. And a lot of the times we have organizations that are doing things for the community. But it's done in in the areas, of course, where there's more Latinos, like Texas, Florida, LA, places like that. But I'm over here in Virginia, and so I would want to be a little bit more involved to get more educated about it, and to be able to do more. I know, just in general, because I work with a lot of young people, I promote voting, right? But I think it's so much more than that. Like before the show started, I was telling Vidal that I went to a breakfast this weekend for 200 plus men. It's an organization. They provide scholarships and a lot of mentorship to young men. And so the keynote speaker, is one of the delegates for Virginia, and he was just kind of telling his story, and it was a very transparent story. Very real, very something that the young people can connect to. And I just think that we need to hear that more, so that young people can say, oh my God, like this person went through this, and this is what they're doing now. And oh my God, they vote too. So I just think that it's crucial to know that other people are doing it. It's almost like when Barack Obama became president. And I remember there was like a big thing on, like these little young Black boys were now thinking like, I could be a president now, right? Because I've seen one. And I just think that's very impactful. And I think we need to see more of that in our community. When I was at the breakfast that Saturday, one of the school board members from a local city came up to me, and the lady that was sitting with me, she said, hey, we have to do this for our young ladies, and it just tells me how we want to do a lot for our community, but it's really just coming together to kind of get it done. My perspective is I don't want to recreate the wheel. So if somebody's already doing some of it and I could just tap into it to grow it more, for me, that's much better than going out here to create my own thing. But
I also think like a big influence on how Latinos vote right now, it's because I think Vidal hit on it a little bit earlier, more like the generational differences. Because if I think about my parents, I don't think my parents ever voted, and then us, the children being born here in the United States, the research and I'm not going to say unfortunately, but we vote based on what affects you. And if I go back and I think at what affected my parents when they first came here, very different from what's affecting me being born in the US, and very different from what's affecting my children, who are, third generation now. So I think there's a big difference when it comes to all of that. I was watching a video earlier, and it was a couple, and they were talking about the whole immigration thing came up, and they voted for Trump because he promised to whatever secure the borders or whatever it may have been, but then the wife was saying how she was conflicted because now, like, the regular moms and pops, people that are working and trying to earn a living here are lumped up with the criminals because they are undocumented, So it's like, how do we create that separation, and how we, uncombine that? Instead of looking at it, oh, you are undocumented in the United States, you are breaking the law, so you are a criminal automatically, even if you have never committed a crime. but your crime is being undocumented, you know? So how do we create that separation? But again, if you're talking to my children, you know, who are third generation born here in the United States, are not affected at all by any of that, that's not going to be a concern to them. But if you talk to my parents, you know, they're going to be like, oh no, we need to change that. You know, something needs to change. We need to do something about it. So I think that generational gap and how our children are being brought up and, you know, doing your research and maybe not only seeing what affects you, but what affects my community. It's I think it's where we need to go. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you hit on a powerful piece again, and it's also a piece that's beginning to scare me across multiple groups. This idea of delineation, because even within the community, it's just this idea of value placed on who was born in the States, who wasn't. If you are an immigrant, how did you immigrate? How did you immigrate? What was your process? You know, and it begins to create these lines, and almost like this fear of, like, we're competing for resources, like we're competing for place and stature. It's like I need to show that I'm distanced from that, for whatever means, you know, for whatever benefit. And that's worrying me. Again, it's across communities. When we think about, you may have heard of ADOS, you know, American Descendants of Slavery, you know, how that group is trying to distinguish themselves from those who may have immigrated from the States, from the Caribbeans, etc., where you're still under this umbrella of being Black, but no, we have to make distinctions around that. And unfortunately, a similar thing is happening where it's like, no. I was born in the States. Yes, I am Latin American, but I'm third generation, fourth generation. You know, I didn't immigrate here. And I did immigrate here, and I went through this process. This is a process that I went through. It was not the process that they went through. And then the value we place on people. And then also how we begin to connect with policies that reflect my place or how I identify myself as, you know, maybe U.S. born versus immigration, naturalized, etc. And again, we don't talk about that piece, but it is something that's simmering, you know, in the community though.
Yeah, I think you make a great point, Maddie, about the younger people, you know, because we call them, we label them as being privileged and, you know, selfish, you know, and all that stuff, all the adjectives we have created for the younger people. But a lot of it is, like you said, it's, you know, how does it affect me? And I think the less conversations that happen at home, the more that it tends to be that way, you know. I know that I'm adamant with my children about, you know, you do things not just because it affects you. I remember when my oldest was in high school, I just saw so much selfishness from him. I told him, I said, Troy, you go to school every day, and every day you do something nice for someone else, right? Don't wait until they ask you for help. Like if you see one of your teachers carrying 3 bags, go up to her and ask her, can I help you? But like every day, do something for somebody else. And I think, and again, it didn't fix his entire mindset, right? But at least for a moment in his life, he has experienced doing for other people and not only doing for self. Yeah. So now that he's not in high school anymore, he still has those Mimi moments, but he calls more often to kind of check on me, to do things that are not always just about him. And I think with technology, with all the screen time that we are having less and less conversations at home. And so people are becoming so of themselves that it's hard for me to vote for the good of the masses, you know. And I wish that I try to you know, this has been like the last year or so. I'll complain about something, but I also think about like, what can I do to be part of the solution, right? Yeah. So the way that my way of trying to, you know, add to the solution through my summer program or through the kids that I tutor in a group setting, I do activities with them to get them to think outside of the box and not to do a lot of to think outside of other people besides yourself. You know, when somebody starts talking about somebody, we all come into this room and we have a conversation and both people get to talk and, you know, everybody takes their turn talking and then both apologize to each other, you know. even though I might think this one particular person was wrong, but hey, we're both going to apologize. So I think a lot of the problem is that Vidal and Maddie, even in my educational realm, I have this conversation all the time because I think sometimes we put the focus on the wrong thing. We have so many programs for the kids, but I just wish that we had more for the parents or for the caregivers, for the guardians of the children, because I remember several years ago, I went to a workshop at ODU, and there was a gentleman speaking there. He said it's a family affair. That's when it's most effective, when you have the grandma, the mom, the kids all involved in that one concept. Then if we all play our role in that objective, then it's more likely that it's going to be more successful. And I just think it's lack of conversations that are happening that makes us not know who to vote for and not want to vote. Because we don't think, especially younger people, they don't think that their vote, like they see these commercials, and I think we do a good job at with social media to get them to vote. But I think there's something missing in that message, that it's still not being done.
And I think that's why it's important for us to share our stories, for our children, like in your case, Viviana, your mom, it's your grandma is still with you guys, for your children to have a good relationship and a conversation, not just be there, grandma's here, she's sitting across the table. No, how do I get to know my grandma? How do I get to know their story, my family story, who I am and where I come from? I think all of that it's huge, because again, knowing who you are, again, because I'm third generation and I was born here. I'm not faced by the same issues, but this is my family history.
Yes.
So I think understanding, where we come from, who we are, how we got here, what we have been able to accomplish, what can be accomplished, can make you look at a person that may be undocumented today very different. So again, doing your research, and not only knowing how, what affects me, what affects us, how, like you said, how can I become part of the solution? What can I do to improve?
Yeah, because at some point we're going to need, even these students. I'm at work in the university. That's why I'm keep saying student. The younger generation, even just the interest in voting and the voting process. My other piece is thinking about who will eventually reflect the interest of the community. Because it has to start us, there has to be some, not even just early interest, but just information, gathering information, navigation, particularly around political spaces. And I don't always think about Washington, et cetera, even just our own communities. At some point, we're going to have to see a turnover, rollover in those who are representing the interests of the people. So who will they be? And not only are they selected, but are they equipped? I think this is the other piece that I sometimes worry about. Not only have someone who's, charismatic, who can get the vote, but can you really do a good job and really reflect the interests of the people? Because I think the first wave is this whole interest, the buy-in. And I think this is where a lot of politics just get you caught in. But then you have this seat now. We need you to represent our interests right now. And so how does that look for us?
Yeah. And I think too, and it's not just the Latino vote, right? It's all the other votes as well. So I would say, celebrities have a huge influence on us and younger people. And I don't know the girl's name, but just a couple of days ago, I saw something on social media, and the girl said, kind of like previous undocumented, but now I'm this celebrity. I forgot what her name was. But I just think messages like that are amazing, because, and like you said, Maddie, just kind of telling your story allows me to have conversation, right? And I think, like what you said, Vidal, about having representation of quality to make sure that you are equipped, that it's something with substance, and it's hard to find leadership in that way. I think is it there? Yes, it is there. I think we need to support it. We need to seek it, find it, so that people can kind of come together. There's a lady at the church that I attend. She just recently got invited to some type of collaboration in Rome with the Catholic religion, and I just thought that it's something that they celebrated in church today because the church I go to is not Catholic, right? But it's just people of belief are getting together for whatever the cause is. And I just think that if we can start to do activities like that more consistently, will be better. Because it goes against the division and conquer concept. If we can kind of bring the circle in, versus spreading ourselves out, I think for me that would be something that would be solution based.
Yeah. And if you think about particularly not only just political activism, just engagement, the church has always been powerful in whatever form. And then also those organizations, those historical organizations that you mentioned. So it wasn't just, gathering around certain ideas. There was action around that. If we want to fight towards certain concerns, things that may be local or national, you learn how to organize around it. You learn how not only participate in the process, but you also begin to learn how to lead in certain these processes. And I feel that I won't say it's lacking. I think it's different. And I say that because I remember summer 2020, when everything was happening and, our students just interested, they ready to get out in the streets and organize, et cetera. And I was ready. I was down for it because I know how those who would train me, they go from civil rights era, et cetera. I'm thinking, okay, they have an interest. They want to organize, let's galvanize all these different pieces. But what they taught me was it's this different element now. They were organizing virtually. They were organizing, connecting, and communicating in this virtual space now that was so foreign to me. But the other piece that was still required is like, how do you think about this strategically? How do you think about what's truly the concerns? How do you engage with people in ways that they'll receive you and they understand that you're trying to be able to support? And also, when do you just shut up and let the people talk for themselves? That's not an easy lesson, I think, that a number of politicians are receiving. Particularly if they enter these spaces, they are heavily exposed, they're heavily influenced by so many different forces. And I worry about those times where we can see even those in political offices, how they're so challenged by forces that the interests of the people begin to wane because they're driven by all these maybe industries and broader interests that may be linked to the role. And think about what that does for the trust of the community. And while we're talking about voting, even my interest in engaging in such a political process to vote towards an individual or vote towards a process, and I'm not seeing anything come and produce this fruit. You worked hard to get me to get there, and you worked hard to get me to vote, but now you're not changing my life and my circumstances in any way. I think that's unfortunate. Yeah.
And I think that plays a lot in the desperation of the people. I think that's the reason why we are in the situation that we are in right now, because people have been disappointed, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna sit here and tell you that I am gonna turn the sky purple, because I can, and I am gonna believe you because this blue sky is not doing anything for us right now, so let's make it purple and see what happens. And then it's like, okay, I'm waiting, sky's still blue, it's not purple, why you're not doing it? So I think that desperation, that wanting change, maybe I can overlook this part because this person is promising that. It's like we are being forced to compromise. I feel, sometimes, it's like, okay, out of everything that's bad, how can I take the good? And will this good overpower the bad, And it's like, it's so convoluted, and people are compromising so much of themselves and who they are as people, that I think we have gotten lost in the in the mix. And yeah, like that's my main concern, like how much, if we are so religious and so conservative, like how much am I willing to overlook, to have a better future?
Yeah.
Yeah, when I think about politics, I always think about, I think people go in it with great intentions, but like you said, the system ends up doing something to you that you can't do those things that you originally wanted to do.
Yeah.
And then, power, greed, all of that comes into play. I always mention Pablo Escobar because I am a fan. But I just think that he just got greedy, too much
Mhm.
money, too much
And you
power.
Colombian too.
That's right. So I just think we have to be so careful, so grounded when you become so powerful, either with money, popularity, any of those things, and not to lose our intentions, our
Yeah.
true intentions of what we originally wanted to do. And I just think that, like we cannot foresee who is going to follow through or not follow through
Yeah.
because it's such a personal thing. I could just imagine being Pablo Escobar and having enough money to pay off the debt that you have with the United States.
Yeah.
Like that is power, right?
Yeah.
And guess
Yep.
what? People are not going to like that you have that power. So
Right.
they're going to try and come and like break you down. So like, what do you do with that?
Yeah. And it's so interesting. It was a comment that was made recently, and I'm still trying to work through it because I don't know how I feel about it yet, but I'll share it with you. Um, it was a comment. The comment was essentially an activist can't be or couldn't be a politician. He was like, an activist can't be or couldn't be a politician. And I was just sitting there like, and so how I was thinking about it is like when you think about particularly activists that are on the ground with the people, for the people, et cetera, but how, and also trying to challenge and even destroy some systems, how we look at power, et cetera. Politicians, you have to navigate systems, access certain powers and gain certain powers, et cetera. So it's almost running counter. And there's also a different type of negotiation and compromise that's involved. And so I thought about that because even with the work I do with diversity work, we also say that to be in this role, you actually can't be an activist, not in the way we sometimes think about it. Like when I think about the work that I do, I can't destroy a sister that I'm also representing. And so I think we need those bodies though. We need those bodies to challenge the system, challenge status quo, et cetera. But it is something about stepping into a position where you represent not only multiple interests, but you also have to yield to certain power to act to gain certain access. And so that's how I was thinking about that statement that he made, because ideally you want that person to get in there and change things and make things happen and represent the people. But it's something about being situated in, I keep frowning up because I think of it like a political mess, you know what I'm saying? But almost having to still walk in it and develop some comfort in it because now you represent even that system. That's a challenging place to be in.
Yeah, you're walking into a place where everything is set up, and your first work of order is being able to fit in. So how do you fit in into something that you don't agree with, but you have to fit in because
Yeah,
you have to get in the door in order to be able to make a change. So if you're
yeah,
not in and you're not trusted and you don't have the power to make decisions, how can you make those decisions? How can you
yeah,
challenge those decisions? And that's the
yeah,
thing, it's like when you become a politician, you have to be friends with the devil and with God, but then
mhm,
how much of each do you pull from,
yeah,
like how much bad do I do to make some good, or
yeah,
vice versa, and I feel like that's what it is. And I've always said it, like when it comes to politics, you're never going to agree with nobody 100%. You're never going to find somebody that you can say, I believe wholeheartedly 300% in everything that this person represents. That's not going to happen. So, but again, it's like how much of whatever is being presented represents me, or my community, or will better, and I keep saying, it's like we have very good friends who are white, and they're amazing, and we steer from that politic conversation because they have their belief, and it's so hard to have a conversation because you cannot explain explain to somebody something that does not affect them? I cannot sit here and have a conversation about, immigration and, being an immigrant in this country, and needing help and doing all that to somebody that does not understand it. They've never had to face it, that's not as important as this part, because that's the part that applies to them, but I think also what we have lost nowadays, it's being able to be okay with that. They're my friends and I love them, and I can be in the same room with them, and they are amazing people. They're lovely people, so just because they believe in what they believe doesn't make them our enemies, or that they don't care about me and my family, and I think that's where we have gotten lost. And it's like, okay, if you believe in this person, then you must be a bad person. And no, it could just be that whatever that person is being bad about doesn't affect you, it affects me. So I think we have to learn also, just like those people need to be good and bad, we have to learn to be amongst good and bad, and hold your own, but also respect one another.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's my sentiment with a lot of things is I could be friends with Vidal, Maddie, and you could like purple and I hate purple. So, but I have to respect that, as long as your lifestyle is not threatening my livelihood, I'm okay with it, to be honest with you. I can still choose to engage with you, and it's like you put people in these boxes, and this is who Vidal is in my life, for this moment. And I just think it's definitely a respect thing. Even husband and wife relationships, you are still individuals, and there's certain things that husband likes that wife doesn't like, and it's okay, and the marriage can continue. But I know it must be the person that is able to do the good and the bad and finagle and work with the system so it can happen. There's a special person, very special person, because I could just imagine the internal conflict of like, I have to be this person here and I have to be this other person here. It would be exhausting for me. But I know it could definitely be done because I've seen it in a movie.
And I know we're approaching time. And this is actually part of the research I'm doing. I'm trying to finish school again. But part of my research is called moral distress. And it's something about being in, it could be an organization, it could just be a system. And a part of just being a part of that system is going to create some type of constraints against your own values. Again, especially when you're not situated in a place where you are the final decision maker. You're not the CEO, you're not the president, etc. But just being in an organization that has multiple interests, especially when politics and money is involved, I think we all deal with some tension between our values and then sometimes the jobs that we have to do. And we'll compromise. And sometimes we'll do that on small scales, but we all have this threshold too, where it's like, okay, I can't step beyond that because that is deeply rooted in my values. That is deeply rooted in who I am. And this is truly important to my people and my family. But where is that line for folks, individually and as a community? But you're absolutely right. And I think that even represents how it was so interesting. The researcher said, again, Latin American community hadn't just been tied to Democrats and hadn't been tied to Republicans. It's really what you and Maddie described. It was just basically, okay, who's going to at least be situated to accommodate at least some of the priorities that we have right now? So it's a right now. Who's situated now that may look like a Democrat, that may look like a Republican, may look like an independent, but I'll go where my family's interests and concerns and safety may lie. That's where I'll place my vote. Mm-hmm.
That's right. It's always a family thing with us. That's the top two, definitely the family thing. But yes, our time is running out. Yeah. Vidal, as always, we appreciate your time, your input, your thoughts. It's just amazing. I hope that you'll be done with school soon because would you call it moral disturbance?
Moral distress.
Distress is a thing. You could write a chapter just on me about it. But yeah, it's definitely a thing. But Maddie, we're ready for your poem.
Yeah, if you need a little bit more distress, I can provide you some material too. So,
there's lots of content.
yes. So this poem, I literally wrote, and the first, when Trump won the presidency the first time. I remember I was watching them count the votes, and I was just watching the TV, and when they were announcing him as, being in the lead, I was just crying. And I remember I spent probably a couple of hours just watching the TV and just crying after everybody went to sleep. So this poem came out. So he won, and America's progress was sent to the back of the line. The suffering and the tears of the past are no longer only in books, but alive in this heart that aches. The pain is real, and the America that was showing hopes of being good for all will not only be great for those whose skin has never been kissed by melanin. Mental shackles and chains put in place to differentiate the masses from the 2%. Once again, clouds of hatred would explain why the sky not only looks but feels blue. I can only wonder if we will ever be able to be all together in the same room. Other nations stare at us in disbelief. We were given a choice and we picked fame, fortune, hate, and called it change. The leader of the biggest nation of the free world is a known bigot. World War III chose to overlook his racist, misogynist ways because he promised to make America great again. But for whom? My exterior will be the first and last impression people like him will see. Forget that I was born in the US of A. My parents' place of birth will always outshine my inherent rights I was entitled to get. My accent will always evaluate the education level I obtain. Forget I speak two languages. My college degree will never be equivalent to theirs. As a woman, I will have to defend who I am, prove that being color and being woman is not a disease or a handicap, and that when making decisions about self, it should be I, because last time I checked this body was mine. My heart aches because as a mother, I am concerned that my dark-skinned boys will have to learn that their Black lives matter, but that the Black lives do matter, but only when they're at home. My cries of desperation are confined to my chest walls. The American dream, now a nightmare sinking into a black hole, 6 feet under, as if I was already gone. But I am here, determined to water this soil until the dream can once again grow. Justice for all, I will always pray. I will pray that this too shall pass, that when the storm is gone, there will be treasures left under the wreckage of our souls to rebuild and reform. Show our children that being human is more than a color. It includes us all, that we can bounce back from any hell as long as God and love are always placed first, because this is our America. And I don't know about you, but I know I am here to stay.
Thank you, Maddie. As always, you always surprise us with the surprise. But I hope that you guys have an amazing week. And we will be here next Sunday at 4:00 Eastern Standard Time again. And Vidal, let us know when you can come back on our calendar again, because I know you're super busy. So we greatly appreciate and value the time that you give us. So thank you. Thank you, Maddie. Thank you, Mark.
If you're watching this with your friends, you'll probably make a joke.
Because you know what you feel on the inside
isn't what you want people to know.
If you have to pretend to be happy,
find someone you trust and tell them.
If you get mad at things and you don't know why, or have thoughts about hurting yourself,
find someone you trust and tell them.
You are never alone when you share.
Seriously, people care about you.
It's okay to not understand what you're feeling.
And it's easy to think that you're all alone.
But you don't have to be.
You're never alone when you share.
Don't be ashamed to tell someone you trust what you're feeling.
You're not alone.
You are not alone.
Find someone you trust and tell them.
Tell a parent.
Tell a teacher.
Tell a brother or sister.
Or just tell a friend.
You haven't done anything wrong.
Talk to someone.
Talk to someone.
It's how things get better.
They were never supposed to win. In a system built to keep black families landless, one decision changed everything. Bitter Ground's Inheritance tells the true story of heirs who fought through Jim Crow, courts, challenges, and silence to claim land, wealth, and legacy. Told by descendant Captain Newborn, this is more than a story, it's a rare victory. A must-read that exposes America's hidden past. Get your copy today.
Are just so impressed with them. Like I said, we've been with them for years. I will recommend and refer anyone to them. We stand by A+ academics. They're the best.
A+ tutorial really did help me with all my grades. They all went up when I came to this place. And I would say I recommend this school to everyone.
So it's a really good environment to be in, especially for me because it makes me look up to my parents.
If you have students that need academic help, A+ Academics is the place to be.
A+ Academics, what a great place to go for academics.
It's just a really great place to learn.